we're seeing the right companies and the right people stick around. The ones that are making the real impact and having that impact are sticking around.
What is going on? It is season 2, episode 6. I'm Adam. Steven is over there. That means this is the NIL show. Joined by newly minted campus inker, repping his campus ink sweatshirt today, Tate Gillespie, former director of NIL strategy at Kansas University, new director of NIL strategy and university partnerships at Campus Ink. What's good, Tate, besides the short hair?
Besides the short hair, I'm excited to be here week 2 in, and I'm already on the podcast. So excited to be here. Shout out for the invite.
Throw you into the deep end.
I got a podcast mic here with your name on it.
All right. I hope my audio is not too bad today.
Your audio's great, but I have to give you shit because I think during your interview process you talked about this.
I think I tried to negotiate that in, and it just didn't happen.
I got no fewer than 2 texts from Tate that were like, "Hey man, like when's that podcast mic on its way?" That's the best time to negotiate, right? Is during the offer period.
I'm gonna get it.
Tate, when we talked in the interview process, a lot of it was like, yeah, you're gonna be, NIL strategy and talking to schools and collectives and stuff, but a lot of it is also like storytelling, helping athletes out, few leaders in the space. And I think that's like an important part. And we learned that even just like Sean's been the biggest advocate of this whole storytelling thing. So I'm excited. I kind of said like, I need to just like back off because now like the experts are in the room. Like this is you guys now. Like I'm good. And I'll go on record. I don't poach people.
This is becoming a theme of our podcast when we bring on new hires.
I said that last week because I don't want like schools and companies to be like, what the heck are you doing?
That is true. I can confirm that. He didn't just make that up.
Okay. Let the record show. Sean actually was really involved in the interview process, and the two of you kind of had that conversation. I'm curious, Tate, talk to us about that process. You've obviously we're going to talk Kansas and stuff like that, but curious to what your experience was like and how that was coming in and talking to Sean and things like that.
No, Sean was great to have on that process, even for like, the formal stuff, but also more like the informal, just like one-off texts, calls, more so just because he was coming from a position that I could really relate to, coming from inside of an athletic department at, a Maryland to Kansas type level, and making that transition over into the private business world was something that I really wanted to pick his brain on. How's that experience been? How have you enjoyed the move? What are the pros, cons? We could relate a lot to some of the administrative experiences. So he was great to just kind of pick the brain on and be like, hey, am I crazy? No? Okay, cool.
It's the season of hope, right? It's the time that when you said there's always next year, it's like, next year's here. We can do this.
Sean, when you've now interviewed and helped us hire like our team, what do you, when you have these conversations like with Tate and with this and that, like let's spend a second there. What are those conversations like? What are you looking for? You're not a professional interviewer. And sometimes you'll text me after and be like, holy shit, they were amazing. But then you were like, I spent a ton of time with them. Can you just spend like a minute there talking about that?
Yeah. I mean, I think that when Tate and I were chatting, it was probably scheduled to be a half-hour chat, and I think it ended up being about an hour and 15 minutes.
Yep.
I think it went that way when I talked to Sean Childers, too. I had that 40-minute Zoom, and we had to re-up it again because I was like, I just love what you're saying. I want to talk to you more about this and hear your thoughts on everything. I don't know. I guess on my end, I'm a little bit more of an intangible guy where I want to hear, first of all, get to know them a little bit as a person, hear their experiences. To me, the value of the team and that culture is so critically important. You're going to be working with this person every day, and you want to know that there's somebody that is bought into what you're doing. And if they played a sport, I think that that's incredibly valuable. There's somebody that knows that it's not all about themselves, that in order for our company to be successful, we got to be successful as a group, right? And so that was a lot of our conversation with me and Tate, where we were just kind of getting to know each other and riffing back and forth on what we know about the space. And one thing led to another, and we're just comparing notes on our experiences in the athletic department. A lot of highs, a lot of lows. Ultimately, it always came back to, I think both of us, Tate, and you probably agree with this, our favorite part of it was dealing with the athletes, right? That's like the best part, right? Wouldn't you say the same?
Yeah, I mean, it's a common theme of, I would say, just admin as a general, but if you talk to every NIL director around the country, there's a lot of stuff that would, a lot of long days, long nights, but it's always like, oh, the refreshing part is actually when you get to sit down with a team or with, one-on-one with the athletes. So yeah, I told Sean all the time, I was like, back to the August theme of like, man, the toughest part would be telling my athletes that, hey, I
Yeah.
won't be there, et cetera. But yeah, that's absolutely the best part.
I have to say you did it with a lot of grace. That was always forefront when you were talking about that transition, and I think you did a phenomenal job. Give the two of you a lot of credit for being very conscious about what happens when you do transition. So kudos to you guys for that. Adam, what do you got?
Hey, before Kansas, you were at Talkwalker,
Yep.
and that's actually where we first met. And I think one of the like really interesting things about your background, there you go, repping the Talkwalker promo products. This is my point here actually is, you were a collegiate athlete at Corpus Christi, went overseas, played baseball in France professionally, then came back and started in NIL on the business side, transitioned into the institutional side, and now back on the business side. Having that like stacked experience is so rare, which I think is really exciting. From the like business side at Talkwalker, vacillating back and forth between those two things, like how have you watched the NIL space and the conversation around it change in the last 18 months or so?
Yeah, it's been crazy to think. I mean, we kind of, to get back to when I, started at Talkwalker and jumped in there with Tim Stevens, who I think most on this call know, like, I couldn't have asked for a better, career mentor at that time in my life, because I was still like up in the air about, am I going to go back and play a little bit? Like, in all honesty, when I first took the Talkwalker job, I was like, I might do this for, the off season, and then I might go back and play again. But what we started to figure out was, with NIL, with such a need in the market, for new resources, for tools, for support for athletes in schools, that I was like, hey, I don't need to be playing anymore. I need to actually make a real impact here and focus. But with that though, like seeing how NIL came about, it was something that I wrote about, in my college thesis. I found that the other day while I was starting to move out. Like my college thesis paper was about the EA Sports video game and why college athletes deserve the right to monetize their name, image, likeness. I'll have to send you guys a picture of it. It's pretty cool.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that was always my go-to in school was like, yeah, I'm going to write about, college athletes monetization. But to take it from that side as an athlete to Talkwalker to the school to now, seeing more and more folks become less enamored with NIL in a good way, where it's no longer this thing that people are calling a trend or a fad. No, this is just going to be, a new market, new industry, but we're already starting to see it mature. The biggest theme I would say, we're seeing the right companies and the right people stick around. The ones that are making the real impact and having that impact are sticking around.
Maybe maybe Capitol Hill might be a little different right now.
It's a whole new world to them. Like, what? This is happening?
Two things on that. The college thesis thing. I bet you, Sean, you've got some awesome archives. I bet Adam, you've got some stuff. I was digging in some stuff too, and I found some business aspiration stuff from my senior year. So we'll have to go down memory lane. Tate, can we for 1 second talk about Adam went off this week? Professor Cook class was in session. We got to talk about it. Because Tate, you said something interesting there. You said the right people are starting to get like, it's almost like everything's like starting to position and mature, and the right people are getting in the right rooms and the right seats. Meanwhile, on Capitol Hill, there's some interesting things going off. And Adam, do you want to spend a minute?
Sure. So basically, the bottom line, if you haven't been paying attention, is that there are upwards of 10 different versions of bills from just as many people on Capitol Hill right now talking about what the path forward should be for NIL, which basically means that the NCAA is lobbying Congress essentially to solve this NIL problem for them. There is a multitude of problems just from that approach at all. But particularly the thing that kind of set me off this week was you had a senator who was listening to testimony from a bunch of different, people that have been in the space at varying levels, most of them from a 30,000 foot level, not on the ground floor. And he said on the record to the nation, I just find it hard to root for freshmen and sophomores when they're already multimillionaires. And that to me, I mean, even recapping this right now is making my blood pressure spike, because that to me is really the root of all of this issue, is that you have people sitting at the highest levels of government where a governing body, the NCAA, knows what their thoughts and perspective are, and they are going to them saying, hey, help us out with this when the foundational belief is that NIL is a problem for no other reason than I just find it hard to root for rich people, which is ironic when we're talking about Capitol Hill. So, Tate, you and I have talked about this a lot. You spend a lot of time within the institution, and I would argue that in order to make change, one of the hardest places to do it, but most important places to do it, is within those institutions. Also difficult to speak freely about things sometimes. I mean, watching these hearings, you had to write briefs on it for ADs and things like that. What's your thoughts on kind of how this conversation is shaping up?
Apparently, I've become known for when these hearings happen, my tweets tend to go a little bit off the rail because, like you, Adam, I tend to get super frustrated with this stuff. But, one of my go-to quotes on this, whenever people ask what's going on, I'm like, well, you've got the future of this, billion-dollar industry that has been around forever being determined by the NCAA and Congress, two groups super well known for innovation and, being creative, right? It's frustrating because, like you said, the main thing that gets me frustrated watching these hearings is the lack of people who are actually involved with NIL on a day-to-day basis. For the first time, having Walker Jones from a collective, to Power 5 level being represented was great. Why is that the first time that we're hearing from collective? There's some ADs out there who are very involved in NIL and they know what's going on, and that's great. You can tell the schools that are doing well in NIL because their ADs are bought in, they're involved. Those are not the ADs that are being propped up to sit in those chairs. It's the ADs that aren't involved and don't quite know what's going on. Like, if there's an AD out there that says that our collective is not talking to anybody within our athletic department or coaches on a daily basis, that couldn't be farther from the truth.
Yeah.
So that's the most frustrating part for me is there's yet to be an NIL director from a Power 5 school, sit in that chair. There's yet to be an NIL star really from a Power 5 football, men's or women's basketball player, be represented up there because while their experiences are important, they're vastly different than an Olympic sport athlete. And I can speak on both. I played at a mid-major school. I know what those athletes are going through in NIL. It's two different galaxies compared to what a Kansas type athlete is going through in NIL.
That's, I think, one of the things that is just absolutely bonkers to me is when we talk about this at those highest levels, right? At the levels of legislation, at the levels of whatever the soundbite is happening in the media, is it's such a one-dimensional conversation. Most of the time, if you ask them, who specifically are you talking about? It's a women's or men's basketball player or it's a football player. And there's this whole other swath of this entire ecosystem that doesn't even register in their consciousness most of the time when we're talking about this. We can put a microscope on what the senator said and that can be a thing we focus on. That's one issue of many, but I do think it's an important issue because it, to me, reveals, again, the root problem is we have no problem with people making money in college sports, right? All you have to do is look at what happened this summer, the institutions themselves making sure they can monetize this as much as they can. We have no problem looking at coaches' contracts. So coaches can monetize this as much as they can, all the way down to the lowest levels of their staff. The only time the issue comes up is when it's like, oh, wait, the players are now making money? Nope. That's where I draw the line. And that's the issue to me is you are so blatantly exposing your bias to moving away from opportunity. And when you stop, young people from being able to monetize the singular thing that they're actually good at, and you watch a governing body try to unilaterally legislate that, alarm bells should be blaring in everybody's brains right now.
Put it super short. It's weird. Like that you want to watch a game and you either like or not like watching the product if you know that the players on that product are making less money. Like this got summed up to me well because when I was playing in Europe, I would have to explain to my, European teammates about the college sports amateur structure and the NCAA, and they're like, "That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard." And I'm like, "Yeah, you're right."
Yeah.
Okay, I have a question geared towards Tate and Sean. Like on the universe, if you put your university hat on or your athletic director hat on, do the ADs want some sort of legislation across the board to even the playing field? Do they want the NCAA to do it and they're just not? Like, because I mean, I was, I follow like University of Illinois AD and like it's kind of like, supporting like, yeah, there should be something. What is the position kind of from the school standpoint maybe from like what you guys hear on the inside without revealing too much, what does leadership really want? If you and these are two Power 5 schools we talked, Kansas, Maryland.
I think it's different at every school, obviously, just because of where they feel themselves positioned by conference, by leadership, etc. So won't speak for any certain school on that. I will say I think largely they don't care where it comes from. They just want what they determine an equal playing field. And I think the biggest part that comes up when they say, oh, maybe it has to be from legislation is because of the varying state laws. I'll speak for us, Kansas. We had no state law around NIL, which for a long time was considered good. You could go off your institutional and your NCAA policy. But then over the time I was there, we saw Missouri's new state law pop up, Oklahoma's new state law, and then Colorado. 3 of our bordering states who our coaches recruit against a lot, found themselves, competing against different NIL bills. So I would say that's probably where a lot of the frustration for administration and coaches came from, and it is coming from, is you'll get varying responses. Is it a different, model altogether from a revenue share employment status? Great. Is it, legislation that's going to put guardrails on it? Awesome. I don't think a lot of them care where it comes from or the, engine of it. They just want everybody to be on the same playing field.
And to be fair, I posted something on LinkedIn and I had somebody ask a really good question. They were like, so are you saying that the way that it is right now is the way that it should be? We shouldn't pursue, blanket policies or standards? And I'm like, no, of course not. The way it is right now is a little bit of a dumpster fire. But the way it is right now is only that way because when this changed, the NCAA said, we want nothing to do with it. You are on your own. And so what it created was this wide open kind of blank slate where you could have maybe some opportunistic bad actors come in and take advantage of athletes, or you could have, we'll just call it like it is, major collectives, Spartan Dogs for Life, decide, oh, just kidding, we don't want to pay you guys. And there's no guardrails to stop those things. So should it stay the way it is? No. But to adjust it just enough to appease antitrust laws while still allowing all of these like legacy controls in place that still don't keep the interest of the best athlete or the best interest of the athlete in mind also isn't the right path forward.
The 2 things I think are the funniest about that keep coming up in there is the uniform contracts that people keep pushing for, that, and then the piece on there about, oh, these deals aren't going to be used for recruiting inducements. Nobody's going out and saying these are recruiting inducements to come to the school. I'm like, that piece is not happening. People are a lot smarter with, how they're structuring those in their words. They're not saying that. And so that will never actually be, fully stopped. But the uniform contracts piece is like, oh, you've actually never seen an influencer marketing campaign be executed.
Sean, what about you, Maryland? Like from your experience, and you were probably early on before you obviously left Maryland. What was the position, or how do you feel like they took it, or maybe that region?
I think Tate hit the nail on the head. I think ultimately it comes down to people wanting a level playing field. In the business of sports, everybody's looking naturally for every loophole, every advantage to get a leg up. The value of the win, financially speaking, is massive. We are seeing a little bit with Mr. Cook's Michigan Wolverines and what they're going through this week with their sign stealing controversy. Sorry, Adam. But no, schools want a level playing field. That's the bottom line. And the NCAA has always been weird because what they have, many call rules, are actually, it's compliance offices making interpretations on these rules. And so there's never really been an even playing field in general. So ultimately, it's this messy cobweb of how can we make this as level playing field as possible for everybody. I personally, I just want to put a pin real quick in the Senator Manchin thing. I want to ask you 2 brief questions. One, who actually knows how much athletes get paid from NIL deals? How many people?
There's 3 people. 3 people. You'll have the athlete, their agent, if they have one, and the school.
Gotcha. So Senator Manchin does not know how much they actually make. 2, how many would you wager? How many freshmen and sophomores actually are millionaires from NIL deals?
You count them on one hand.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's what really bothered me about that whole statement, was that painting this wide brush that I can't watch sports anymore because freshmen and sophomores are millionaires. Well, there's very few that actually are. And so to just paint this negative light across it, that's what really drove me the most nut. And there are many, many reasons to be upset about it. But that one, it was just in its simplest form. It was like, what an asinine statement. Make sure I got that clear from you, Tate, as somebody that was just on the inside.
That is correct. Yeah.
I think too, like we keep circling around this, which is fine because it's important to clarify these things because this is what's driving the national conversation right now. But I don't necessarily think that is an accident either. I mean, you have when you get to these highest levels of legislation or leadership or whatever you want to say, they're pretty smart and they do a really good job at making sure that things go their way, right? And we had a conversation recently where some schools wanted to put us in touch with, some of their current partners that handle a lot of different group rights activations and things like that. And the first thing that they told us was, oh, we never sign students to anything that's exclusive. So I'm like, okay, great, cool, good idea. Us neither. So we can start doing jerseys and, well, no. So we don't sign the students to anything exclusive, but if you're using our program, we have one company that we let do jerseys and we have one company that we let do name and number tees. So I'm like, okay, so you have created a system in a way that you can truthfully go out and say, we are non-exclusive. You can do whatever you want. However, we pretty much own this whole space. And if you want to work with us, you got to go through this one provider. So when you hear these conversations around people saying there's no innovation, there's no ability of choice, or there's this pseudo monopoly going on, that's what we're talking about, is these legacy stakeholders have created in a way where they can truthfully say, no, you can do whatever you want. But if you want the one thing that's going to bring you the most value, we control 100% of it. How did you navigate some of those conversations with your athletes at Kansas, Tate, particularly as it relates to like them wanting to do stuff that was licensed?
It was a tough one. And you hit the nail on the head with the pseudo monopoly, because in so many ways, as crazy as it sounds, it always blows people away when you actually explain how, the licensing and the logo acquisition works at 99% of these schools. Is, we would have athletes that would come to my office and be like, hey, I'd like to, use our logo with this, or I'd like to wear a Kansas shirt while doing this. It's not even me that gets to go. I'm like, yeah, you need to go talk to our Learfield team. And like, athletes don't know who, an MMR partner is. And then I explain that. They're like, so we actually don't control our own logo. I'm like, yes, that is correct. So like, yeah, you need to go talk to this third party that runs it. And I think that's probably the most frustrating, confusing part for so many student athletes in the NIL ecosystem in general, is that so many of these things are third party operated, third party run, where the school really don't have a ton of control over it.
So would you say, Tate, it would actually be beneficial for them to be able to have almost like a representative body themselves that actually understands all of the nuance and MMR partnerships and layers of licensing and control? Would it be beneficial for the student athletes to have a representative body that way?
If my mic could go any louder than it is, I would say yes, and I would scream a little louder. Yeah.
We've talked a lot about this legislation piece and the frustrations of it, but there's also a lot of amazing things that are happening in the NIL space, and you kind of spearheaded a lot of them at Kansas. One of my favorite things that I know you guys launched, because it aligns with what an institution is supposed to do, is educate their students, was this NIL certificate. Can you talk a little bit about what the NIL certificate was and how that got started?
Yeah, so that was probably my most project that I'm most proud of in our time there. And that's something that started back in August. I'll admit I went extremely naive into navigating campus and the academic side. I was like, oh, I'll know exactly who the 3 or 4 decision makers are on something like this. We can get this done. We can move it fast like athletics. No, that conversation started in August and it got done in, I think, February or March. And people were like, wow, that moved so fast. And I was like, people were blown away by how quick it
That's
moved.
the academia world.
Yeah, no, it's awesome because we have a very good sports management program, as I came to, continue learning, in a very good journalism school. 2 things that are very relevant, in NIL. But what we kept seeing a lot of was the general student population being interested in NIL. And it was all spearheaded because I think the first 2 weeks I had my email set up, I probably had no less than 20 students email me and say, hey, I don't know how or what, but I want to learn more about NIL. Can I set up a Zoom call? Can I do an internship? Like they were just wanting to be involved. They're like, I want to be working in sports and I know NIL is going to be one of the most important pieces of it. How can I be around it? So I really kind of started to think like, we need something for this student population, a way for them to get involved. I was lucky we had a incredible faculty athletics rep that really could push it across the line. She carried the torch for us on that. We had a sports management professor that stood up, Jordan Bass, and he was like, I'll own this thing. It came out to 3 different courses, all centered around NIL, and they were great. They're self-paced courses, but there was stuff that aren't being taught from the fully academic side, which I thought was great. Guest speakers were myself. We had coaches on there speaking on, hey, how does a coach navigate NIL? Athletes are involved speaking, hey, this is the athlete's point of view on NIL. So really getting to take it completely out of the academic side and really mix some real life stuff in there, along with a mix of sports law, sports management, journalism, and being the first Power 5 school to offer that certificate was something that we're really proud of. And I think those classes filled up in a matter of 1 or 2 days to where it hasn't been announced yet, but there's more stuff that was ongoing as I was leaving, more partnerships. So I think Kansas is going to continue to be a pace setter on the academic side for what you can do with NIL.
That's so stellar, and I think a big piece of kind of setting the tone for the athletes and what they want or what they should be doing in the NIL landscape is really setting a culture of it across campus, which is what you were a huge advocate for. How did that change? And I know it was still early, but how did that change maybe athletes' perspective, administrators' perspective, or coaches' perspective when they saw the institution taking a stance of like, hey, this is a good thing. We actually want to create resources around this. Did you see that ripple effect across the athletics department as well?
Yeah, we saw it because I think so many people, and Sean, you can absolutely relate to this being in an athletics department. There's such an echo chamber that starts to exist of, for us, it was, there's not many times where you leave Allen Fieldhouse where your office is. Not a whole lot of, times you get out there. So I think it really helped a lot of people understand like, oh, wow, there's a lot more people that care about NIL that are outside this athletics department or are donors or businesses. There's people that just want to learn about it and make a career out of it. Like we had students that wanted to be sports agents. Great. You need to learn about NIL if you want to be an agent. That's going to be, a massive part of it. That, and I think we always get back to, you can look at the good NIL or the bad NIL. And I think that really helped showcase the good NIL, that could exist on campus. And I think our athletes really enjoyed it.
Okay. Tate, so in my pitch deck to investors, I have a slide. It's a quote from a player that may have transferred from Michigan to Kansas. And it says the people hating on me would leave their job right now for a $10,000 increase. I got less than 6 figures at school X and now, for the year. And in my slide, I say NIL deals, matter. Like if schools are not progressive or if they're not thinking about this or if they're on their heels, the athletes will get a little antsy, right? Can you talk about that from during transfer portal period? What was that like? What were the emotions? Were there just as many athletes coming, searching and saying, where is there better resources? Where are there better opportunities? How much does that actually come up? Obviously, this made a lot of news, but could you shed a little light there?
Yeah, I think one thing that really surprises a lot of people is there's this conception out there that athletes, we'll use transfer portal athletes as an example, are going to schools and saying, I want X or this is my number. And that's not really happening. What athletes are asking about is they want to know, hey, if I go out and I perform, on the field, on the court, I put up numbers, I take care of my brain off the field. Am I going to be able to maximize, my opportunities and my resources here? Do you have the resources for it? From a collective perspective, from a business perspective, from an NIL, just overall resource perspective at the school? Or am I going to be leaving money on the table? Because for so many athletes, this is their highest earning potential, throughout their entire lives for a lot of these athletes. So they want to know in this 2-year window, am I going to be leaving money on the table or do I have everything I need to succeed? So when you're able to tell the stories of past players and be like, hey, this is how they've done a great job with this. These are the resources and the tools here. It's pretty easy for them to be like, oh, yeah, okay, this is real. And honestly, where a lot of it's coming from is players talk to current players when they're on the visits.
You
That's who they're
think?
talking to. Is hey, because they can sit through a presentation of like, hey, these are all the resources, great. But if they go talk to their host and like, yeah, what's that? And yeah, actually, we don't get any of that. Then that whole pitch is out the window. So when you
Uh,
do things that match up, it's great.
That's really interesting. So, two things. First thing is we had a player bring a potential recruit through our print shop,
I saw
and
your
he
LinkedIn post about
and he
that.
asked about it and said, "Can I bring someone through?" And I was like, "Uh,
I
I
think
was
so.
like, I think so." But like he obviously knows what he's doing, senior on the team, and as he was coming through, it wasn't, "This is how much you make per shirt." It's, "This is the merch company we work with. These
Yep.
are where our jerseys are. We just drive up here and stop in and get our stuff. They're great to work with. Like, this is Lindsay, this is Jenna. They're part of the family, and like that alone, that wasn't a recruiting inducement. That's just like, hey,
Yeah.
these are the perks we get. No differently than these are our facilities. These are our locker rooms. These are this are what our bowling alley looks like, in our game room and all that good
Yeah.
stuff. And I thought that was such a great example of players doing the work on behalf of this, like the schools maybe have their hands tied a little bit and can't do those things, and the players doing that. And so like I'm sure players are texting with each other, and I'm sure we see it happening in the NBA
Mhm.
with players kind of colluding and saying, I'll go here, you go here, well, we'll do this. Like we did it to pick rooms in our frat house. We were figuring out ahead of time who's getting good, getting room picks. But it's kind of the same thing as like they played with these guys in AAU. They've grown up with them. They sort of want to assemble their own fantasy team, and that's natural. You're never going to stop that. But I think it's also really, really, really a positive thing. So with that being said, you see something like Utah where all the athletes got new trucks, right? Can you guys break down the anatomy of that deal? Like, how does that deal go down so everyone understands? Like, does a dealership donate them? Like, yeah, explain that one, because that came up in on Capitol Hill, and I don't think it's that big of a deal. But
It's really not. So I mean, like they just did a really good job of publicizing it. It's not something unique that like, oh wow, they're the only group of athletes that are getting carded. That's happening at every Power 5 school around the country. And they just did an incredible job of publicizing it. And what they've done is they've done a great job of turning that into that's not a recruiting inducement, but they're telling every recruit that comes in there, they're like, hey, look at what our current players are getting. Look at how they're maximizing that. That's an opportunity. How that's typically going to go is that's going to go through their collective, and the collective will probably sign every athlete on that team to an NIL deal, a contract that says the collective has the right to, use your player name, your image, your likeness, and our marketing deals. You are required to promote the collective. That's why you'll see some athletes tweeting about donate here to, fundraise for the collective. They're using that in exchange for monthly payments. Just a normal standard brand contract, just happens to be with the collective. Now, as part of that, like, oh, hey, also the value of this car lease is going to be included in your collective contract. It's really nothing groundbreaking. It's happening everywhere. To get 85 of those things is more than most schools are doing. They did a great job publicizing it.
But I mean, if you think about it, like, okay, 80 car leases. I don't know what a truck lease is for these days. Maybe $400 a month. Call it $4,000 a year per guy. It's a $300,000 NIL deal across 75. I don't know how many guys got them or whatever. But that's not crazy.
No,
It's not crazy.
There's a decent chance that some of those they might have been donated by a dealership because the
And
dealership wants to be involved in that. And
yeah, and now you've got 60, 70 guys. I don't know how many got them. That's just to show I don't know how many guys are allowed on a football roster. Now they're all marketing for that car dealership. That car dealership is famous now.
And that's exactly the thing here is like, a lot of people can point to that as saying, "Oh my gosh, they're getting cars, they blah 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 blah." But the car dealership didn't have to do that. Let's remember that nobody was like strong arming the car dealership to do this. They are understanding that they get a massive value back from entering into these deals and these agreements with the athletes themselves because there is value to be had on both sides. And,
Yep.
we're not giving away cars for free. It's a lease that you can use while you are enrolled there on the team. no different than, hey, are you a music student? Come here and use our top of the line, recording studios or top of the line instruments while you're a student here on campus. It's just a part of being a member of that ecosystem. That's not new. That's not out of this world, and that's not backwards. That's just the way the market
Coaches
works.
coaches have country club memberships written into their contracts, and comp cars. It's
a little more than that, yeah. And but if you think about it, like, I don't know what car dealership, what brand of car it was, to say it was like GMC or something. They're gonna spend millions of dollars in advertising. They're gonna pay for Super Bowl commercials. They're gonna have billboards. That could be one of the best uses of like micro influence in a local area, that they're like, shoot, we really need to pop this area up. GMC could say, we're not doing very well in this region. This is how we're going to go in and kind of plant a huge seed. It's a genius brand marketing deal.
I just want a follow-up question on that, Tate, because you understand this really well. So, a lot of times that deal is going through the collective. Why is that going through the collective? Why doesn't every person who has any value in NIL just go get themselves an agent and just, because nobody has problems with agents doing it, but all of a sudden when we put a collective in place, it's like, oh my gosh, this is an issue. So, why don't these guys just go hire an agent, call it a day?
Yeah, it's because realistically, the agent piece is a whole nother issue that I can rant on. Another thing is, that's one piece I do support in legislation, is anything that calls for an agent registration. Because right now, anybody can put in their Twitter bio that I'm a NIL agent. I've seen some that have said NCAA certified NIL agent. I'm like,
that's not a thing.
Yeah,
you're a sophomore in college.
Yeah, I had one DM me one time at Kansas say I'm a Big 12 certified NIL agent. Like, oh, I must have missed that come down the but anyway, to answer your question, Adam, is because there's not a lot of guys that want more cooks in the kitchen, right? Like, they want to be able to handle this themselves. Collectives have popped up as essentially marketing agencies that are hyper focused and hyper local. The best collectives are trying to be the WME and the CAAs of their college town, right? Of, Tuscaloosa. They're trying to be the WME of Knoxville, Tennessee. Those are the collectives that are doing the best job, is those that are looking at it like that. And on the flip side, what makes it easier for a business is they're still in the mindset of, you told me for 100 years I can't give these guys a free, cup of Coke at my restaurant. Come in and filled that void of, hey, we can help you, we can walk you through this. They've existed, to get back to your point, because schools are so hamstrung and can't do it themselves.
I just want to hear from Tate real quick on the pressure that NIL directors are under when they're at schools. And you're getting it from athletes, coaches, administrators, fans, who all want something a little bit different. Describe what that pressure is like, and how quickly, when a deal like those trucks at Utah, when that comes through, there's got to be a little bit of you that's like, oh boy, here we go. And who's knocking on the door, and how fast are they going to knock on that door, saying, when can we get our trucks? What's that pressure like for an NIL director?
Yeah, so it's a common theme. If we were to have some other folks on here, they would say the same thing. What makes it that pressure is because there is such high expectations, but such low real control over things. Of like, there's so many things that I would see, like, I would love to go out and do that, but we are reliant on our, a third party, right? And that's the frustrating part, is on so many areas, the schools and the NIL directors don't have that direct control right now, to actually go out and proactively do it, that it's constantly reliant on a third party, be that a brand, a collective, whoever that may be. So that's where the frustration can come in sometimes. You're like, I would love to go handle this myself. I would love to do it, but that's what NIL's turned into. It's, I saw this, we should be doing it. It's the constant keeping up with the Joneses. That's where it's important to have your North Star. And we would constantly say, like, North Star, stay on track, keep doing what we're doing, keep being sustainable at it. Because if you chase every shiny object in NIL, you're going to end up off the course so fast.
I know we're coming up on time, but I got a couple quick hitters we can just run through real quick. One of the coolest things that I saw this week, Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver at Ohio State, All-American star. He's wearing 7-Eleven Speedway cleats this weekend, with proceeds from sales going to Nationwide Children's Hospital. I didn't even know that was something that athletes could do, was partner with a brand and put that on their apparel shoes that are team sponsored. Tate, can you touch on that real quick?
Yeah, that one is probably like a every compliance office might have their own interpretation
Yeah.
of that. I know we didn't do anything like that. We haven't seen anything like that, but I'm personally in favor. I think it's sick. I
Yeah.
encourage more of it.
Mhm.
Just my personal 2 cents on that. But yeah,
I
every school's different on that.
I mean, breaking rules on what you wear on your sneakers is not something new. So,
Yeah.
Yeah, and good reference to Michael Jordan wearing the black and red shoes, by the way, Steven. We had a couple really cool drops last week. I just want to touch on from our company. Western Kentucky, they had a thing go viral where every one of their position groups, there were 7 different position groups, were wearing a different big red logo on their helmet for their Tuesday night game, which was last night. Unfortunately, they lost. But Western Kentucky, Colin Stoker, always phenomenal, came to us with an idea. Hey, what if we do this for our athletes? Our creative team got our heads together. Sarah Hoffman, Sean Childers was involved. We're able to create a shirt with that big red logo on 7 different shirts with each position group, those players within them splitting commissions there. So just like a creative way to make NIL happen with a viral moment. That was really, really fun. And then Gabe Cups, he's a star incoming freshman at Indiana, just had an incredible idea for this breakfast club, which is him waking up at 4 a.m. every morning and working out at 5 a.m. before anybody else is up. Big shout out to Molly Pfeiffer, creative account manager for Indiana, and Sean Childers, again, our merch designer, who they saw that thing through from start to finish. And I think the most important thing was they knew that there was an opportunity there. They started it really, really early on. And so they were able to concept through, have some discovery calls. They were able to get samples out to Gabe. So he was able to have an amazing photo shoot out at a local Waffle House. If you have not seen the pictures, go check out the pictures. Really, really cool. And then because there was this incredible story tied to it, I think Indiana fans really resonated with that message of Breakfast Club. What fan doesn't love hearing about an athlete that is super into getting up early and working out and making himself better? That resonates. And so had a lot of success. So really cool drops that I just want to touch on from last week.
And I think the coolest part there is like Colin from WKU, super helpful in like kind of getting our wheels turning.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the, on Gabe's stuff, like, AT from Excel, he's obviously working on huge deals with his players, from the agency side, Excel being, one of the largest. But he understands that this is a brand building moment for Gabe that can last him for as long as he's playing basketball. And so like, it was very insightful when I talked to the team at Excel. They're like, for us, it's just a little different. Like we just want to help them plant these seeds now. Not that they're going to get rich off these. I mean, he's sold a ton already. I know he's made a boatload, but it's just so interesting to see like it from both sides and having 2 incredible activations. All right, Tate, one question before we leave. Adam, hit him with it.
Most important question of the day, Tate. Not your playing career, but Tate today. If you could sign your dream NIL restaurant deal, who are you signing the deal with?
Fogo de Chao.
Oh, that's a great call. And all you can eater.
I'm keeping the card on green the whole time.
Yes.
Going with it. Yeah.
And a market table to go with it. Oh
yeah, so Fogo, if you're out there, we'll figure something out.
You know where to find him. That might be an all-timer right there. I love ending on that note. Tate, fantastic conversation. I know that these topics, we're really grateful to have your perspective on them here and now on Campus Inc. I'm sure we'll have you back on the show here again very, very soon. I'm Adam. That's Steven. There's Sean over there. That's another episode of the NIL Show. We will catch you guys next time.